There is a particular kind of pain that almost no one talks about. You see someone else's life, and suddenly your own feels smaller. Someone is more successful, more beautiful, younger, more confident, more desired, more accomplished. Nothing has actually been taken from you, and yet something inside you changes. You were satisfied 5 minutes ago. Then you looked. This is the strange power of comparison. It does not need to destroy what you have. It only needs to convince you that what you have is no longer enough. And perhaps that is why one of the oldest images in the fairy tale world remains so unsettling. A mirror. In Snow White, the queen does not simply look at her reflection. She asks the mirror a question. Who is the fairest of them all? At first, the question sounds almost innocent. A question about beauty. A question about appearance. But listen carefully to what the question really asks. Not, how beautiful am I? It asks, where do I stand? There is a difference. The moment beauty becomes something that must be ranked, another person becomes a threat. There can only be one who is fairest. And suddenly, another person's beauty is no longer simply beautiful. It becomes evidence. Evidence that you may be losing something. Evidence that someone else may be rising while you are falling. Evidence that perhaps you are not as valuable as you believed. The queen's tragedy begins here, not with Snow White, not even with the mirror. It begins with the belief that worth can be measured. We live with our own versions of that mirror every day. Sometimes it appears on a phone screen, sometimes in a photograph, sometimes in a conversation with a friend, sometimes in a promotion that someone else receives, sometimes in the quiet moment when we discover that another person seems to be living the life we thought would be ours. And the mirror asks its ancient question again. Who is more successful? Who is more attractive? Who is more loved? Who is further ahead? Who matters more? The modern mirror may no longer speak with a magical voice, but we have become remarkably good at answering it ourselves. And this is where the story of Snow White becomes more than a story about jealousy. Because the most disturbing question is not why the queen wants to be the fairest. It is why she needs the mirror to tell her that she still is. What happens when your reflection becomes more important than your experience? What happens when approval becomes evidence of identity? And what happens when someone else's beauty, success, or happiness begins to feel like a verdict about you? The queen believes she is looking into a mirror, but perhaps the mirror is looking back at something much deeper. A fear, a fragile identity, a need to be confirmed, and a life slowly organized around the gaze of someone else. Because the most dangerous mirror is not the one that shows us how we look. It is the one that teaches us how much we are worth. And once we understand that, the arrival of Snow White begins to mean something very different. She is not simply the woman who becomes more beautiful. She is the reflection that the queen cannot bear to see. And that is where the real story begins. Snow White does not have to attack the queen. She does not need to take anything from her. She simply has to exist. And somehow, that is enough. This is one of the most uncomfortable truths about comparison. Sometimes, another person's success does not hurt us because they have harmed us. It hurts because their existence awakens something we would rather not see in ourselves. The queen looks at Snow White and sees beauty, but perhaps she also sees time, youth, possibility. Everything she fears, she may be losing. Snow White becomes more than another woman. She becomes a measurement. And once another person becomes a measurement, comparison changes the way we see them. We stop asking, who are they? We begin asking, what do they have that I don't? That question can quietly transform admiration into envy. Someone receives the promotion we wanted. Someone looks comfortable in their own skin. Someone seems to have the relationship, family, body, career, or confidence we believe we should have achieved by now. And suddenly, their happiness feels strangely personal. We may even feel guilty for it. We tell ourselves that we are happy for them, and perhaps part of us truly is. But another part whispers, why them? This is where comparison becomes psychologically dangerous. because the other person is no longer allowed to simply be themselves. They become a symbol of our perceived inadequacy. Their beauty becomes evidence that we are less beautiful. Their success becomes evidence that we are behind. Their confidence becomes evidence that something is wrong with us. But notice what has happened. Nothing about the other person has actually changed. The change has happened inside the observer. The mirror has appeared, and now everything is being reflected through it. This is why Snow White can be understood as more than the queen's rival. She represents the unbearable possibility that value can exist outside the identity the queen has built. If the queen has spent her life being the fairest, then Snow White's beauty does not merely challenge her appearance. It challenges the structure of her identity. And perhaps this is why comparison can feel so threatening in our own lives. When our identity is built around being successful, attractive, intelligent, desirable, or admired, someone else's excellence can feel like an invasion. We are no longer simply witnessing another person shine. We are wondering what their light says about our own. But there is a hidden question beneath all of this. Why must another person's beauty become our defeat? Why must their success reduce our worth? The answer may lie in the identity we have built around being seen. And that identity has a name: the persona. Because sometimes, before we become afraid of losing our place in the world, we become attached to the image that gave us that place. The queen's greatest fear is not that Snow White is beautiful. It is that Snow White might prove she no longer needs to be the most beautiful woman in the room to have value. And that is where the mirror begins to reveal something deeper. In Jungian psychology, the persona is the face we develop for the world. It allows us to function within society, to occupy roles, to be recognized, respected, and accepted. There is nothing inherently wrong with a persona. We need it. We need an identity that allows us to enter a profession, a relationship, a family, a community. The problem begins when the mask becomes the self, when being successful becomes more important than being alive, when being admired becomes more important than being known, when looking confident becomes more important than knowing what we actually feel. The queen has built an identity around being the fairest. Her reflection has become part of her social existence. So when the mirror changes its answer, it does not simply criticize her appearance. It threatens the identity she has built around that appearance. This is why comparison can become so exhausting. We are not always comparing our lives. Sometimes we are comparing our personas. We look at another person's carefully presented image and place it against our own hidden reality. We see their confidence, but not their doubts. Their success, but not their failures. Their beauty, but not their insecurities. Their finished photograph, while we are living inside the unfinished version of ourselves. And then we wonder why we feel inadequate. The modern world has multiplied these mirrors. We can now compare ourselves with thousands of people before breakfast. But the psychological mechanism is ancient. The persona asks, how am I being seen? And comparison asks, am I being seen as valuable as they are? This is where the mirror becomes dangerous. Because once our identity depends on the reflection others give us, we become vulnerable to every change in their gaze. Praise lifts us. Silence unsettles us. Someone else's success diminishes us. Someone else's beauty threatens us. And criticism can feel like the destruction of the self. The queen cannot simply look away from the mirror because she has given it authority. And perhaps we do something similar. We polish the image, protect the reputation, maintain the appearance, collect approval. Yet beneath the persona, another question waits. Who are you when there is nothing to prove? The queen never reaches that question. She remains trapped inside the reflection. And when the reflection begins to change, something underneath it begins to fracture. Because beneath every carefully protected image lies the possibility of a wound. And when that wound is touched, the need to be admired can become something far more desperate. It can become a need to remain superior. And that is where the mirror begins to reveal its darkest secret. The queen's reaction to Snow White becomes easier to understand when we stop seeing it as simple vanity. Because beneath the desire to be admired, there can be a much more fragile fear, the fear of becoming insignificant. Narcissism is often imagined as an excessive love of oneself, but psychologically, the deeper problem can be more complicated. The person who desperately needs admiration may not feel secure in their value at all. They may need the reflection because, without it, they do not know what to believe about themselves. This is what makes the Queen's relationship with the mirror so revealing. As long as the mirror confirms her superiority, she feels secure. But the moment it names someone else as the fairest, the reflection becomes unbearable. The problem is not simply that Snow White is beautiful. The problem is that the Queen's sense of identity has been built around being the one who is more beautiful. Her value depends upon comparison. And when comparison changes, her identity begins to collapse. Something similar can happen in ordinary life. A person may appear confident while secretly depending on constant confirmation. They need to be praised. They need to be noticed. They need to feel exceptional. And when someone else receives the attention they expected, something inside them can react with disproportionate pain. The conscious mind may say, "Good for them." But somewhere beneath it, another voice asks, "What does this say about me?" That is the narcissistic wound. Not simply the pain of losing admiration, but the deeper disturbance that occurs when the image we depend upon no longer protects us from feelings of inadequacy. Comparison becomes the trigger. Someone else's beauty, someone else's intelligence, someone else's success, someone else's youth, someone else's happiness. Each one can become a mirror in which we see the parts of ourselves we have learned to reject. And this is why envy can be so revealing. Envy does not always tell us what we want to possess. Sometimes it tells us what we believe we are no longer allowed to be. The Queen sees Snow White and encounters more than another beautiful woman. She encounters a threat to the story she has been telling herself about who she is. The tragedy is that she never questions the story. She questions only the person who threatens it. And perhaps we do the same. When someone else's life makes us uncomfortable, we may try to change the reflection rather than examine the standard by which we are judging ourselves. We want them to disappear, to fail, to become less impressive. Because if they become smaller, perhaps we can feel large again. But this is the trap. No amount of superiority can permanently heal an identity that depends upon comparison. There will always be another mirror, another face, another person who is younger, richer, more attractive, more successful, or more admired. And if our worth depends on remaining above them, peace becomes impossible. The Queen believes she is protecting her beauty, but she is actually protecting an identity that cannot survive without superiority. And now the story is ready for its most important revelation. Because perhaps the mirror was never measuring beauty at all. Perhaps it was measuring something far more dangerous. Who deserves to feel valuable? The Queen has spent her entire life asking the wrong question. Who is the fairest of them all? It sounds like a question about beauty, but beneath it lies something much more dangerous. Who has more value? Who deserves admiration? Who is winning? And if someone else is above me, what does that make me? The mirror never needed to say these things directly. The Queen had already given it the power to decide. That is what makes the symbol so unsettling. A mirror can reflect an image, but it cannot tell us what that image means. We do that part ourselves. We decide that youth means worth, that beauty means desirability, that success means superiority, that admiration means importance. And once those equations become part of our identity, comparison becomes almost impossible to escape. Someone else's achievement becomes our failure. Someone else's beauty becomes our inadequacy. Someone else's happiness becomes proof that something is missing from our own lives. The person has not defeated us. The meaning we have assigned to their existence has. This is the deeper tragedy of the Queen. Snow White does not take the mirror from her. She does not destroy her beauty. She does not even need to compete with her. The Queen becomes trapped because she believes there must always be a winner. And if someone else becomes the fairest, she must become less. But human value does not actually work that way. Another person's light does not reduce yours. Another person's youth does not erase your history. Another person's success does not invalidate your effort. Another person's beauty does not make you less beautiful in any meaningful sense. The hierarchy exists inside the mind. And once we see that, the mirror changes. It is no longer simply an object from a fairy tale. It becomes a symbol of every external authority we allow to define us. A number on a screen, a compliment, a promotion, a photograph, a social status, a person's attention, a stranger's approval. All of them can become mirrors. And the more mirrors we collect, the more dependent we become on their reflections. This is why the deepest transformation in the story cannot be defeating Snow White. It has to be questioning the mirror. What if the question itself is wrong? What if we were never meant to spend our lives asking, who is the fairest? What if a human being does not need to occupy first place in order to have value? That is where comparison begins to lose its power. Not when we become better than everyone else, but when we no longer need anyone else to become smaller so that we can feel whole. The queen wanted certainty. She wanted the mirror to tell her that she was still enough. But the mirror could never give her what she truly needed, because no reflection can create an identity. It can only show the image we bring before it. And perhaps that is the final secret hidden inside Snow White. The most dangerous mirror is not the one that shows us another person's beauty. It is the one that convinces us that another person's beauty has the power to determine our worth. Once we understand that, the question changes. Not, who is the fairest, but, who am I when I no longer need to win? The mirror does not have to disappear. We do. Not disappear from the world, but from the need to constantly measure ourselves through it, because there will always be another mirror, another photograph, another successful person, another younger face, another career, another relationship that appears happier from the outside. The world will continue offering us reflections. The question is whether we will continue allowing those reflections to define us. This is where the story of Snow White can become something more than a warning about vanity. It becomes a story about identity. The queen believes she must remain the fairest because she has forgotten how to exist without being the fairest. Her identity has become comparative. Someone must be above. Someone must be below. And if she is no longer above, she feels as though she has disappeared. But individuation asks something different. It asks us to become increasingly capable of recognizing who we are beyond the roles, images, and expectations through which the world sees us. This does not mean rejecting the persona. We still need our social identities. We still care about how we are perceived. We still want to be loved, respected, and appreciated. The transformation happens when these things stop being the foundation of our worth. We can receive admiration without depending upon it. We can appreciate another person's beauty without experiencing it as an accusation. We can celebrate someone else's success without turning their achievement into evidence of our failure. And perhaps most importantly, we can allow another person to shine without believing that their light makes ours disappear. This is the opposite of the queen's tragedy. She sees another person's beauty and experiences it as loss. But there is another possibility: to see another person clearly without using them to measure ourselves. That is a very different relationship with the mirror. The mirror can still reflect, but it no longer judges. It no longer ranks. It no longer decides who deserves to feel valuable. And this may be one of the quietest forms of psychological freedom. To look at another person's life and remain present in your own. To admire without comparing. To notice without ranking. To be seen without becoming dependent on being admired. The question at the beginning of the story was, who is the fairest of them all? But perhaps the more important question was never about beauty. It was about worth. And worth was never supposed to be a competition. The most dangerous mirror is the one that measures our value by the approval of others. But once we understand this, the mirror loses some of its power. We no longer need every reflection to confirm that we matter. We can look. We can notice. We can even dislike what we see sometimes, and still remain whole, because identity is larger than appearance. A life is larger than its comparison. And a human being is larger than the reflection other people happen to prefer. The mirror can show you an image. It cannot tell you who you are. That part belongs to you. And perhaps growing into yourself begins at the precise moment when you stop asking the mirror, "Am I enough?" and begin quietly discovering that you never needed its permission to be. Perhaps this is why the story of Snow White has survived for so long, because the mirror is not really an object from a distant fairy tale. It is something we carry with us. We look into it whenever we ask whether we are attractive enough, successful enough, young enough, loved enough. We look into it whenever someone else's life makes us question our own. And sometimes, without realizing it, we hand the mirror the authority to tell us what we are worth. But the mirror can only reflect. It cannot measure the soul. It cannot measure the meaning of a life. It cannot tell you whether you have become enough. And neither can the approval of other people. There will always be someone more beautiful, someone more successful, someone younger, someone more admired. If your worth depends on being above them, there will never be a moment when you can finally rest. But when comparison loses its authority, something changes. You can admire without envying. You can witness another person's success without experiencing it as your failure. You can allow someone else to shine without feeling that your own light has disappeared. And perhaps that is what the mirror was trying to show us all along. The question was never really, who is the fairest of them all? The deeper question was, who are you when nobody is telling you that you are valuable? That answer cannot come from a mirror. It has to be discovered within the life you are actually living. So the next time you catch yourself comparing your life to someone else's, pause for a moment, ask yourself, am I seeing this person, or am I using them as a mirror? Because the most dangerous mirror is the one that measures our value by the approval of others. And sometimes, freedom begins when we finally stop asking the mirror for permission to be enough. If this story made you see comparison differently, share your thoughts in the comments. What is the mirror you find yourself looking into most often? And if you want to explore more stories where ancient symbols reveal the hidden conflicts of the modern psyche, subscribe to Unconscious Wisdom. There are still many mirrors waiting to be uncovered.